people who set this topic. This is a manufactured policy challenge. The reality is, mainstream academics and countries' leaders simply don't go out discussing whether colonialism creates more harm than good. It simply does not happen. It's simply not relevant. It doesn't happen. But moreover, and the reason that's significant is the harm simply isn't that clear. So even if we accept that some fringe British academic is talking about the benefits of colonialism, what does that really mean to an African whose family was victimised in South Africa? We never really heard what this harm is, other than this assertion that it's really massive and we need to intervene to cut down free speech. But you know what? Let's accept that this is a pressing challenge and move on to that. With all due respect to the opposition, they produced an incredibly shallow analysis of colonialism. No one disputes that certain atrocities were committed through colonial rule, but there are also certain benefits that both teams have agreed existed. Moreover, what also needs to be discussed when considering colonialism is, number one, that different colonial powers did different things, not this like monolithic colonial bloc. But secondly, ladies and gentlemen, that you require a degree of a counterfactual when you assess how significant the impacts of colonialism were. The issue is, what would have happened if the colonial powers weren't there? And I can tell you, if you surveyed Mughal India, ladies and gentlemen, you're not going to say that was paradise and the British came in and totally destroyed that natural state. Simply not true. So all of this isn't to suggest that colonialism is or isn't a good thing, but rather to suggest that there are viable arguments that suggest that there are clear, concrete benefits, such as infrastructure, such as the rule of law, such as reduced overall instability, ladies and gentlemen, which means that there's a viable debate that needs to be had. A few points of rebuttal. So firstly, is it principally justified to restrict this form of speech? The basal principle we outlined in the opening opposition was very clear. We believe that free speech is essential to a democratic polity and should only be reduced in the most extreme circumstances, where there is a clear, direct harm from that speech. We don't think this instance is that situation. Why is that? Firstly, we believe that the marketplace is, by far, the most powerful corrective. Let's be very clear here. Like, they've framed this like bizarre, non-factual world where like there's these powerful academics and powerful media institutions propagating this view. This stuff just generally doesn't get all that much airtime, ladies and gentlemen. You're not going to be able to, have a massive spread in The Guardian about why colonialism does more good than harm. But let's accept that proposition. Let's say this actually does happen. We think it's ridiculous to say that the pro-colonialism people have this privileged status, which means they don't get attacked. We think if you come out with an op-ed defending colonialism, you will be destroyed, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't have appropriate academic backing for that view. We think, have you ever met an academic? They love tearing each other down, ladies and gentlemen. If these views don't have any weight, they will be shut down. There are counter-narratives everywhere that get prominent dissemination. So what Ruby said on that point was frankly untrue. No, thank you. Moreover, for an academic, you are, like you said, staking your authority, staking your credibility on being right. We think that the best academics won't do that unless there's a clear foundation and clear research for that. And if that exists, we're happy to have that debate. The second reason, ladies and gentlemen, why this isn't the circumstance to restrict is the unintended consequences. And this is the point they missed. What does a trial do? It gives the best possible soapbox for your crazy views. We think most of the people who do these are these fringe academics and fringe hard-right people, say the BNP, who propagate these narratives. They would love nothing more than to be put on trial for their views, because their opening statement can be, colonialism was good, black people are inferior. This gives them an incredibly high-profile platform, and this is something they wouldn't have otherwise, right? It's not as if they'd have cover-to-cover coverage in The Guardian of their views, but in a trial where the international media is coupling the issue of free speech and the issue of colonialism, ladies and gentlemen, this becomes at the forefront. No, thank you. Moreover, we think this strengthens extreme views. We think it strengthens these narratives by saying that, you know what, this is actually true, but the government needs to shut down the narrative entirely. The government simply can't win this argument through people rebutting each other. They have to shut down the discourse entirely. We think that legitimates the most extreme views. Moreover, ladies and gentlemen, this is really crucial and was missed by Ruby. There's actually a genuinely valuable debate to be had about the impact of colonialism that gets elided by their case. So why is that? We think there's a critical amount of research that can be done about what colonialism did, how that impacted the structures of the society, and whether that was a better outcome than the status quo. So when you have a debate about the impact of the West in Africa and the way they segmented these countries, that has crucial relevance to the current division of these countries, to the current breakdown of ethnic minorities, ladies and gentlemen. We think that's crucial. Moreover, it has crucial benefits that I'll look at later in terms of accountability for leaders. We think the problem in Africa, one of the biggest problems, is liberation leaders like Idi Amin, like Robert Mugabe have been able to say every problem you face is traceable to the legacy of colonialism. And anyone who says anything different should be shut down and criminalised, ladies and gentlemen. When you can have a real debate about colonialism, you force these people to actually take more accountability for what they did, for their missteps. And we have this ridiculous example about the jungles of Congo and the disaster there. Well, the jungles of Congo are fucked up not just because of colonialists, but also because of Rwanda and Uganda meddling in the Congo, ladies and gentlemen. All of these problems get elided, and you can just say colonialism is the only root cause of every deprivation that occurs. We want to shut down debate from that. Yes?
Right, you tried India. By the time of European colonisation, the British Confederacy was a growing politically state of economic superpower. Within a century, it became a drug from China. Would you like to try an actual example?
I would love to try. India was not a centralised, effective state. It was a collection of mini-states that constantly warred with each other. They had terrible degrees of poverty and had constant ethnic conflict between Muslims and Hindus. So don't give me that total bullshit, ladies and gentlemen. Colonialism didn't necessarily make things better. We had infrastructure, we had centralised control, we had some degree of peace. So, let's look at 2 points of argumentation. One, why trials would be extremely harmful. So let's be very clear. We think this gives people on the fringes the chance to litigate their views and provides them with a degree of unity with free speech advocates. They can say that they're like Mandela. This is a tool of civil disobedience. They want to go to trial. They want to be convicted because their views are strong enough to do that. That just legitimizes this rhetoric that otherwise would frankly just wash away in the ether, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think these views actually have that much power. You increase their power and you unify them with libertarians through this plan. Don't want to be unified with libertarians. So, secondly, this allows liberation governments to accountability. And I've already briefly mentioned this in my rebuttal. We think one of the biggest problems in Africa is an accountability void. We think when you can claim that colonialism is the cause of these problems, and we can't have any real debate about what colonialism did, you create significant problems. So we think, ladies and gentlemen, when in a country like Mali or Nigeria, you can say every problem is traceable back to the French imperialists. What that means is you can't have a valid debate about the good things that were done by these colonial powers and whether the current state is delivering on the same benefits or delivering on the same value to their citizens as them. So ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, the harm was incredibly speculative and the damage is clear. We oppose.